Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation every other
Hell
weekish
yeah.
now. Yes, hell yeah. The last time we talked was like right before American Thanksgiving, 2 weeks ago. Since then, a lot of news has happened. But as usual, Chris, I'm just going to ask you what's been up, ma'am. We haven't talked really much even since then, as is the usual now.
Yeah, I mean, well, I hang around Discord every other, now and then, but
Actually,
it's just me
it's
and
true.
Tuan
Sometimes I
usually.
see you. Yeah, I see you
Yeah,
hop on
yeah.
there, and I'm like, ugh, I should go talk to Chris, but I'm like already laying on the couch, and it's 9:30.
Too
And I'm like,
blasted, yeah,
I don't want to get
too
back
chilled out.
up and get on my computer. Yeah, fuck that.
All good, all good. Just been, working a lot. Right now we're just, I think it was a similar story last time we were talking, just, neck deep interviewing right now. So it's really interesting to talk to so many really great people in our industry and meeting new people. And it's really exciting, but it's also really, really challenging. I think hiring around the holidays is probably the worst time.
Oh
So,
yeah,
yeah, I'm definitely feeling that. It wasn't something we chose. It wasn't something we chose to do, but yeah, that's kind of the cards that have been dealt to us. So, but yeah, it's basically I'm living in LinkedIn and then in meeting rooms all day talking with people. So,
are you LinkedIn power user at this point? Then, like, are you a full convert? I'd never spend more than
you know
like
what?
10 minutes of it at a time.
I really don't like LinkedIn. I think I wish there was like a better product than LinkedIn, but it's just kind of something you just have to use.
Yeah.
And I also think a lot of people in the game industry, at least at Blizzard, never really used LinkedIn. They fucking never would update it. People who are principals were still like associates on LinkedIn. They just never updated it. And so it's hard to like get in contact with people in the game industry because I think most people are just really projects just take so long to build, and usually a lot of people are very interested in the product they're working on. So you
Mm-hmm.
know it's harder for them to just sit around wait, or I don't think a lot of people in the game industry move around as much as like in tech or
Unless,
movies or
well, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I guess unless you're a contractor or something. But I never personally relied on LinkedIn. Like, I don't think I've gotten any jobs through LinkedIn ever, and I only really update it every couple of years when I switch positions, just because it feels like that's the thing you're supposed to do, even though it's never really like made anything happen for me. But I mean, at Blizzard, I would bet a lot of people at Blizzard, this is probably true all over the games industry, is games is just so full of projects that can spend long times in pre-production and get canned or not really go anywhere. And I don't know, thinking about the next step in your career is just not particularly exciting for a lot of people that just want to focus on making cool shit. So, like, who wants to be updating your LinkedIn profile if formerly you were at Blizzard and you're like, man, I'm never going anywhere, Like, I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. What do I need a LinkedIn profile for? I'm already at Blizzard. Well, that's
Until
exciting. So,
recently, right?
are you going to, yeah, until recently. So, like,
I'm teasing.
does this
Sorta.
ever transition out of this like stage for you? Are you going to be just full-time obsessed with hiring for what, the next 6 months, a year? I mean, do you get to take a breather and develop a little bit, or like, how do you think you're going to navigate this? Because obviously you're going to try to staff up to a pretty big degree, right?
Well, kind of our goal right now is to hire. We have 9 people in the team right now, and we're gonna have an outstanding offer soonish. And then but I think kind of the goal is to really grow the team to around 12 to 13, maximum 15, assuming we have incredible candidates that we loosen our belt to hire. Because we have 5 million in the bank essentially. Some of that's been spent already for the last 6 months. But that lasts us until like around 2023-ish if we keep like the team around the size. But kind of the idea is to have around 12 or 13 for the next year maximum, and then we'd be raising the next round, and then raise another round of funding, and then grow the team upwards to 40 to 50, and then ship the game.
And so in between all of those stages, you can take your foot off the hiring pedal a little bit and
Yeah,
really, yeah.
I'll probably stop hiring or stop focusing so much on hiring probably February or so. We have a lot of really great candidates for the roles that we're talking to. So assuming we get, some of those, then we should hiring will be closed for a little bit, and then I'll have to focus on other things. But definitely Definitely one thing I've learned is just there's so much work to do, just business wise, outside of just, game design. So probably a big thing once we raise the next round and start hiring is people who would be doing things that I'm doing right now, which is like,
Right.
organizational things or HR or hiring, yada yada yada. So,
Mm-hmm.
but for right now, it's been a cool experience to learn all these different roles and wear all these different hats. Because once we do hire for these roles, it's good to have some experience and know what to look for. Right now that I've been hiring, recruiting, and stuff, I have a lot of really good questions to ask once we, would hire someone who does recruiting. So.
Yep. Yep. Well, it's dope. And did you do anything fancy for Thanksgiving again? I remember asking you if you were going to cook, but it didn't sound like you went
Well, usually
anywhere.
what I do is I drive to Northern California, which is all my family lives there. My parents, my brother and sister live all there and their families.
Yeah. Yeah.
This year I didn't go up because I went up during Halloween, and so I kind of skipped on Thanksgiving this year just because you're just driving up there for a dinner, really. Although it's a great dinner and all of that, it just every other year I kind of skip it. So this year I just kind of stayed down here and caught up on some work and played some games and chilled out.
Steam cleaned.
Steam cleaned. Oh yeah. Oh man, we got to do our
The neat
min
episode.
max products episode.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the next one. Yeah.
I know, yeah. I mean, we should do one before I go home for the holidays around the 18th, or else I'll have to do one on the road. We'll figure it out. Well, that's
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I went to Seattle for Thanksgiving. It was great. I didn't have any problems getting across the border or back this time, which is nice. And fuck, man, one way or another, like all of the people that I'm still quite close to in Seattle have now moved to within a couple blocks of one another in this like one, district in Seattle. And so when I visit now, I only have to visit one little cluster, and everybody like has each other's house keys and just like drops by uninvited, like fucking Kramer style. And it's just like, I really left kind of with pangs of wondering if I should still be living there. I have no real interest in like leaving my current gig nor moving back to the States. I do want to kind of ride out the Canadian citizenship thing. But man, good friends are really, really important. I missed a lot of those people dearly. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I came back up, fully recharged. Went right into some kind of Christmas shopping that I had on my brain from different things people had said they needed. I realized I fucking love Christmas shopping now, only because it gives me the satisfaction of buying stuff that I think I would like and I know people would appreciate. And like, I don't have to worry about it cluttering up my house. I don't have to worry about if I already own it. I could literally re-give gifts that
Yeah.
have brought me joy to like other people. I didn't buy anybody any steam cleaners, but I did buy a massage gun for some friends that are both pretty active, and just like little things like that. Most people
Oh,
on my
massage
Christmas
gun.
list are
That's a good
probably,
idea.
yeah, most people on my Christmas list are probably getting slippers, though. I bought some killer slippers a month or two ago from some place around Vancouver that makes these sheepskin slippers. And it was like all local and run by some kindly old man. And as soon as I put those babies on, I was like, I'm just giving people slippers this year. Like they feel so goddamn nice. It's been really cold up here. We got a little snow earlier in the week, and that was exciting. Hasn't deterred me from going in. The office is still feeling really good. I'm having more and more fun with sound design lately. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I kind of have
Using the
woken
what's
up.
it called? Ronde? Is that what it's called?
Ronde, yeah. So Ronde is like it's like similar to a Discord, but with it's like a Discord Slack type thing. It's a voice chat meeting program, but you can move around an environment. There's like spatial audio. That is, if I position my avatar to the left of someone, they're on my left and things like that. And it was kind of, its development was spearheaded and supervised by one of the founders of Clay, my boss, Jamie. And now it is a full-on product at rondeapp.com. Yeah, we use it constantly. That's not paid sponsorship, I guess, but I'm digging it. But yeah, now that I'm getting used to encountering real humans again, the days when I go home and I'm not at that office, or if I go in and a bunch of other people don't, I feel so sad. Like I'm really quite, I don't know. I like that. I mean, you're in the office every day, but that chemistry is, we talk about this every fucking episode now, I feel like, but I just can't get over it because it's such a shift coming out of COVID to have game development feel really like exciting again, which for me involves that in-person energy, I guess. But Shit's good. What else is up? Have you been playing any games lately? Do you have any time?
I haven't had that much time, honestly. What was the last game I was playing? I was playing Hunt Showdown a bit. Have you played that?
No. What's it about?
Hunt Showdown? It's kind of like it's like a PvP game where you go into a map and it's like a survival kind of experience. So it's kind of similar to Tarkov in some ways. There's like objectives you have to do, and kind of like it's more PvE than Tarkov is in terms of like objectives of killing certain bosses and competing over that. And there's like all this progression system with sort of like talent modifications that you could do. But there's some interesting stuff they do in this game, which is, in Tarkov, it's really kind of like almost a horror game in some ways, where you're like creeping around the map and making sure you're not making a lot of noise. Like sound design is really important in that game. Sound is really important because if you could hear another player, then they could die, right? Like you could shoot them and stuff. And so you got to like tiptoe around a lot in that game. And similarly, it's kind of like that in Hunt Showdown a bit. And what they do is like some cool stuff where it's like there's like birds perched somewhere and you didn't see them and you walk by them, all the birds make a shit ton of noise and people are like, oh fuck, someone's over there.
Right.
So yeah, they do a lot of clever things with sound and stuff. Kind of got me thinking. It's just that we don't see a lot of those dynamics in a lot of games, and I kind of think it's because, or a lot of AAA games, let's say, it's just because I think a lot of it is just that, what do you do for hearing impaired people, right? You got to build a whole like UI layer for that, and then that fights with the game design of it being kind of immersive, or I mean, a lot of times
I mean,
UI is
I'll be
gonna
honest with
easier.
you.
Yeah.
Like, I should be more clued up on this, but I'm not really even that learned on what the affordances made towards the hearing impaired are in competitive multiplayer shooters right now. Like, what happens if I'm a hearing impaired person playing Overwatch and I'm supposed to know it's, Bastion's footsteps running around the corner? Is there anything that kind of tips me off about that? That is like a
No. Mm.
no. There's not.
But I mean, in that game, it's important, but it's not that important.
It's not okay. It's
But
not
in
as
like
critical.
Tarkov and this
At
Hunt
least
Showdown,
you could see the
game,
birds though in
footsteps
this
are so
game.
important. Yeah.
So there's something, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think
yeah.
of other games like I'm not really like playing New World anymore, but it makes me think about, we had that talk about how it seems like a lot of their most beloved implementations of sound probably stem from that time when things were more like you had to be on your toes and it was constant hardcore PvP. So somebody mining was really exposing themselves, and that's why there was this echo in the canyon and stuff, because if someone stepped out and used their pickaxe, it was a choice. And then you could find where they were, mining and go after them. And similarly, trees fall down and things like that. I wonder if some of the choice to not do more of that dynamic, environment disruption is really just like based on the complexity of having to run like a server-side sim that would synchronize that event across like everybody's game in terms of the display. Like maybe typically people like to leave the ambient critter stuff, the reactive stuff, just handled locally. I wonder. I mean, yeah, that's cool though. So that's different than Tarkov. You don't feel like there's as much environmental disruption that happens in Tarkov.
There is, but they don't have
is.
things, birds and environmental things that tip stuff off. I think there's a lot of cool opportunities for that. Like if you, trip over a wire, it fucking sets off an alarm, and that, things like that. There are a lot of cool like little opportunities for environmental interaction with sound. I just think sound is just kind of a dimension of game design that's not really fully realized in a lot of games, but you are seeing a lot more. Like Breath of the Wild had one of their core systems was, God, what is that thing called? Where it's like when the sound meter basically, and that was like an added dynamic of the game. If like you're running around, the sound meter would I guess that's one way that in the game that you can make it so that the hearing impaired can kind of track sound. Is just that if you're making a lot of noise, the sound meter's just popping off or whatever. And they didn't really utilize it very much in Breath of the Wild, I guess. There were some parts where you had to like sneak past creatures, and so if you moved quicker,
your own actions.
Sounds. Yeah. It was tracking your actions, but also the environment too. So
yeah. I've thought about that. Like, I had this idea for a long time earlier in my career about how I wanted to work on like the crunchiest fucking stealth game in which detection was really simulated off of whether a character at the AI's position could be reasonably expected to have heard the sounds that you made based on the same kind of like sound propagation model you would use for their sounds. And could you use things, acoustic phenomena such as like masking? That is, if like, there's another big low sound playing nearby, you could like move something and have it sort of obscured by the louder sound playing. And then maybe something you were doing would go unnoticed while something else was happening. There would be ways to obviously script these sort of interactions. Right now, you could have, and actually this kind of brings me to what I've been playing lately, which is Dishonored 2. You could have an incident where in the game, like a tower collapses and there's a huge wooden explosion. And like during that period of time, the game could say, turn the player's noise checks or stealth checks off during this, right? But it would be doing it based off the fact that that event had triggered and not off of the fact that it was kind of running a sound analysis to know if the AI, combatant was going to be able to like detect the player amidst the noise of the other thing. You know what I'm saying? And I still don't really know any game that's done this to that degree. There are also just kind of aren't that many stealth games anymore. Like the immersive sim genre is something that had that much tech and work put into it would probably be kind of expensive, and you don't see a lot of them. But I do remember asking, God, I don't remember what his name is. The audio programmer at Naughty Dog about whether they used something like this to handle some detection cases in The Last of Us 1 back when I played that, because I was really impressed with like how even, the blind clickers would need to react entirely off of sound, right? They had no vision cones. And he said that they did, I don't remember if he said that they did do that or if they could have done that with their like ray casting tech that they were using to send sound out and run checks. But I mean, you tell me. Like, I think that would be kind of super cool, but it moves things really towards the simmy side, and I don't know. It would more be just like a fun thing for me to probe into as like an audio nerd. Anyways, I've obviously never made that game. There's my big rant. If you're listening to this and you're working on that game, please leave a comment and tell me what it is so I can get excited for it. And
Yeah.
Or just steal it and make that game, because I would totally love to play it. Yeah, so Dishonored 2. It's good. I haven't played an Arcane title since the first one in like 2012, I want to say. And it's really taken me back. I forgot how inspiring a lot of their weird ambient kind of like acoustic guitar, smeary beds and things like that were on me at the time. And I really missed that they have a really fucking cool aesthetic. It's like steampunk, but not in the sort of, classic, like, I don't know, steampunk, but like it's not like the convention cringe version of steampunk, right? Like it's kind of bleak and like rat infested, and in this one there are like clockwork automata that are moving around, and it still feels in place. And anyways, the big difference between Dishonored 2 and Dishonored 1 for me is that I feel okay just killing shit. Like I'm not playing this in a full save scum mode. I kind of let things go badly and just deal with it. Which I think is more of a sign of me getting older and just wanting to spend less time like perfecting games. I don't really care about doing that quite as much. But I do appreciate that the game explicitly tells you in tooltips and such, like, it's okay if you get seen. There's no right way to play the game. If you want to go bloody and increase the sort of the chaos of the world, which will cause different encounters to happen because the world is responding to you, go for it. If you want to be stealthy, go for it. I don't know how everybody feels, but, I used to just get trapped in these stealth games. And I would convince myself I liked this too, but I would like have to reload over and over again and get like the perfect runs. And I just like more of my time was spent saving and reloading than probably playing the fucking game. And I'd get to the end of the game and I had like barely even shot a gun, And that is one way to do them, but not so much into that anymore. It's more fun when things get crazy. And then maybe I'll check out Deathloop at some point after that's done and just kind of and keep on that tip. Do you want to talk about some news?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big one is it just feels like the NFT Web3 crypto thing is just so God. if you're a gaming startup, you hear it every like 5 minutes. Someone's reaching out to you, they want to partner because they have some crypto coin they developed that they want you to use, or some investor who invests in Web3 uh, games or companies or whatever. It's just insane right now. It's a fever pitch, I would say, right now. And you see all of these bigger companies now getting into it. Like EA mentioned that they're getting into it. Activision, Ubisoft is the big one recently that announced that. God, what is it called? Quartz or whatever is
Quartz.
their
Yep.
crypto Web3 NFT thing, and they got so much flack for that, right? And so it sounds like I mean, I haven't like read deeply into it. I just kind of saw the headlines, but they kind of pulled back on it a bit and just like unlisted the video. And I heard from some other founders some rumor about some of the backstory is that some execs that were the ones making this decision whether to do NFTs personally invested in some of the solutions and companies that developed the technology for it. So
Sorry, is this with Ubisoft and Quartz specifically, or
Ubisoft,
talking about
Ubisoft, yeah.
dude?
So
I mean, you can't
so
you
it's just
can't
kind of
have
money
that.
moving around, right?
Yeah,
So
that just the god that just plays like further into the classic anti-crypto narrative that it's all just fucking money laundering. A narrative I want to say I subscribe to, by the way, but we want to give everything a fair shake here. That is a
yeah,
bummer.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I've not substantiated that, but it's what rumor that I've been hearing from other people who would perhaps know. I just think it's really fascinating because we were talking about this like a year ago, maybe longer, about crypto and the viability. It's like a conversation that's been in our group in our private Discord for a long time, and definitely there's a lot of traction. There's a lot of interest by investors, by companies, by tech people, whatever. And I do see some viability to some of the technologies. Of course, Bitcoin and decentralized currency is very kind of compelling for sure. But it's all these kind of crypto games and all these crypto startups or whatever. They just so it's always fascinating because they have like 3 engineers and then they have like 20 concept artists, and you can imagine what those concept artists are doing. I don't know, it just feels like so Ponzi right now, but
Let's
you know
let's
yeah,
like just first off give everybody some context here, because I don't know if everybody's been clicking through. Although we have
yeah,
had
yeah,
a
yeah.
bunch of NFT discussions in this Discord lately, so if you've
Hmm.
been checking out the channels, you've probably seen some of it. But Ubisoft has launched a platform called Quartz, in which people who, I guess, log in via Ubisoft Connect, I think that's one of the prerequisites for being able to earn these things, will be able to earn digits, which is, I think, what the token is, and it's on top of the Tezos blockchain, which seems to be like one of these kind of clean NFTs. It's a proof of stake thing, which means it's much less expensive to validate a new blockchain entry than it would be on something like Bitcoin. That's one of the typical arguments against NFTs is they're environmentally disastrous because you have a ton of distributed computing just basically solving complex math problems with graphics cards just to validate even the tiniest fraction of something changing on the ledger. So they have
Hmm.
this platform. I was reading into it a little bit just to see like what they were talking about doing with it. Maybe like the design implications about doing it,
Hmm.
and they really don't. And I think this is one of the common. This is like at the center of every gaming NFT discussion for me right now. Even like a part, I think it's even more centered for me than the environmental discussion, because capitalism generally, I think, devalues environmental costs like across the board, right? Under this system that we live in, a tree is, worth more dead than alive. A whale is worth more dead than alive. And so our values are all skewed. The fact that Bitcoin, et cetera, are like really bad offenders is a problem, but everything is sort of problematic right now. So let's talk about what NFTs do for games. I still haven't seen an application of NFTs for games that makes me feel like, fuck, that really augments what I personally want out of the experience of playing games. Which I guess is like memories, a good time with friends, a feeling of mastery, learning, growth, good storytelling, like all those sorts of things. I think what all the offerings in the game space from NFTs so far have seemed to be right on the collectible side, and they talk about basically strapping an economy onto an existing game experience. They don't. A lot of them in Quartz and Digits don't seem they seem similar in that they're not going to really change the way any of these games that you can earn digits with are played, but it will be the creation of a new digital object that there will be a limited quantity of that you can resell at a later date. Like that's what the whole platform is. I don't think these are cosmetics. There are obviously like wearable NFT cosmetics that are being created and stuff as well. But to me, I don't want to play games to be able to like make an extra $10. Like I personally don't care about that experience as a gamer. I think strapping hustle culture onto the side of everything is just kind of disgusting. Outgrowth of wealth inequality and where we're at, and like bringing that shit into my games too. Like I want to play games to just check out from all that garbage, I don't want to be thinking about what the value of like my random gun skin that just dropped is going to be. And I think that, sorry, this is a huge rant. One really interesting quote from the press release on Quartz that I was reading, or it was a VentureBeat article, is there's a quote that says, Quartz gives you the ability to own your own items and cash out the value when you decide to stop playing. And like that is one of the selling points. And to me, I'm just like, okay, so all this is telling me is that like now you've created a basically extra point of monetization on the game, which is the player can buy it to start playing. They can buy stuff within the game. And then there's also money involved when they quit too. To me, it just feels like trying to find every possible point of value extraction and going there because that's what the industry demands. And I think NFTs are a symptom of that. And that's why I can't get too excited about them. But like, I don't know, what are some of your own opinions on them? Like I think personality-wise, you tend to be much more of a futurist and an optimist than me. And you are a founder. And I think by nature, you can look at concepts like this and see what they're going to be and not just tunnel into thinking about the consequences that they'll have. You know what I mean? Like I tend to be a little more of a realist, not gloomy, but
more pragmatic, let's say.
More pragmatic. And so I'm interested always to talk to people who get excited about these things. But most of the people who are excited about these things, I feel like are excited about them because they need the Ponzi scheme to stand up. Like in all of your talks with
they have a
people,
vested interest, let's say, in its success. And I've seen that kind of switch happen in people who are very skeptical, and then all of a sudden the founder is like, well, we're doing NFTs, so it's the future, and here's why it's the future. I was like, well, yesterday you just said it was a Ponzi, and today now it's the future. But anyways, so I did want to say like hi to Candace first. It seems like Candace has popped on.
I didn't even notice that she popped on because I was knee deep in an NFT rant, which is obviously what Candace loves to log into. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Fuck traffic, fuck LA, and I guess fuck NFTs. Is that what we're doing right now?
I'm asking Chris if he thinks fuck NFTs is where
well,
the conversation is.
I think my view is that I think right now, I think it's a new compelling technology that no one really knows what to do with yet. And I think kind of it's sort of a problem searching for a solution. I really have, mixed opinions of Jason Schreier, but he had like a really good article questioning and talking about the fever pitch interest and in Web3, crypto, NFTs recently. And I think he did basically a good breakdown of just like, it's, there's some interesting things here, but so far no one's really made a compelling case for it. And a compelling case is basically, we couldn't do this before NFTs and crypto and Web3, but we can do it now, right? People are like, well, you can make a Diablo game, but then instead of the auction house, it's all decentralized. You're like, okay, but how's that a better experience for the player? And they struggle to really say why. Like, oh, well, maybe they could sell it for real money, but yeah, you could do that before. I mean, it was kind of shitty. You had to use like eBay and stuff, but how is the user experience so much better here? And it's also kind of the reason why they didn't let you sell things for real money back in the day wasn't just because they didn't have the technology or want to spend the energy to do that. It was more because they thought it was against the core experience that they wanted to deliver in the game, right? Once you think about every item in the game and like, oh, I could get like, DoorDash tonight if I just sell this. It's just like, is this really what you want the player to think about? And
No, I mean, I
value in the
don't.
game? I don't know. Maybe I'm just too boomer to realize this, but and Candace gave her own experience about Diablo and the economy and how that changed the game for her. I think, right, Candace, in the past. And so, I think that is a very common kind of view, and I think something very conscious that a lot of game designers that I know and have worked with are very conscious about. So, yeah.
Interesting. From a game design perspective, I have this really odd feeling about NFTs because when you think of when you think of the connectivity of games now, people still want good narrative, single player experiences, but they're also looking to connect with people online, and even more so as the next generation becomes, more and more online via their mobile devices and whatnot. And as the world becomes more globalized, right? As pop culture becomes more globalized, and it would appear the economy becomes more globalized, if that was even possible, by breaking down the barriers of currency, right? So when you think of these worlds, you want them to be thriving and you want them to be diverse, right? You want the experience of logging into a game and potentially meeting someone from the Philippines or Brazil or something, because that's really interesting, right? And you get a lot of culture there and you get a lot of meaningful experiences. And so, on one hand, it feels like NFTs allow that in a way that they make games not only approachable or accessible, but they also make them profitable. But then the other part of me, the game designer in me, says, well, like, just having a lot of people in one place does not make a good community or experience. And so your game has to be fucking top notch, right? To unite people through things like language barriers and cultural barriers and potentially political barriers that maybe people don't even have control over, right? Like who it can be online, when they can be online, etc. So um, I always think of games like EverQuest in that way, where there was a really strong personality filter your first 5 minutes of playing the game. Like if the first time you died, getting your corpse was really hard and maybe you fucking just said this game isn't for me, right? But if you made it all the way to level 60 in like vanilla EverQuest or whatever, like the original EverQuest, then you were a certain kind of person and it filtered out your personality in that way. And so the game felt big. It felt like you connected with more gamers than you had ever seen in your whole life back then, because people were kind of hush hush about video games. And I'll stop ranting here in just a moment. But like, so
No.
to me, the two forces here are like, you want a big thriving community in your video game and you want that to be appealing, but at the same time you want people to flock to each other in things that they have commonality with, even if they don't have commonality in like everything, right? Like, I'm not an MMO player or I'm not a story person, but I like PvP, or, WoW does that really well. A good MMO is well rounded in that way, and people can make their own little communities out of it. So, bringing it all together, I think that NFTs are a great opportunity to make a widely accessible, very diverse community of people that, for better or worse, is amazing and has all of this potential. And also because of everything Chris was saying about, a centralized currency, and maybe you don't want to play a game to make money, but maybe somebody in Vietnam or the Philippines, they do want to do that and they can make meaningful connections playing
Mm.
these NFT collectible games. I think a lot about gambling games as well. One of my best friends, she's from Shanghai, and she met her husband in a gambling game, and they fucking, that's just what they do. They play the game and make money, but they fell in love. So, anyways, uh, different different strokes for different folks. But I think that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
the real thing, well, like Chris was saying, it's such an untapped. People haven't realized what they should do with it or how to unite people in a way that's meaningful, that is also playful and gamery. So right now people are split between, there's the econ of playing video games and then there's like the pleasure of playing video games. But I think if you strike the right note there, you could change the world.
Mm,
You
mm.
mean make it so that the two are indistinguishable? So people aren't drawing this
No,
barrier between the playing
no.
and the econ part.
I mean, ideally, yes, but I don't think that I think that there's jobs and then
Or
there's pleasure, and like those are two different things. But if you can find a game that pulls people into each other, so you could have 6 or 7 distinct like clans or communities or purposes in your game, but as
mhm.
long as they're all inviting and as long as they're all good, like if you want the econ people, like the auction house sellers and WoW, right? Like there's this whole like cluster of people on a server who are secretly like rigging the entire economy of certain things, at least back in the day, right? Like, oh, don't sell your peace bloom for this much during the AQ war or whatever. And they really enjoy that. They look at the economy on other servers. They see what it's, they have this whole like sub niche of people. And those people are very different than the pet battle people in WoW. And
Well,
those are very
I'm,
different than the
yeah.
PvPers in WoW. And, so what I'm saying is like, not everybody has to love everything. But if
Mhm.
you can give everyone a common environment and an ecosystem in which they can thrive, then you've just created the next actual living, breathing virtual world.
And I mean, another dynamic of this whole idea and thesis too, like just to play devil's advocate for the Web3 metaverse vision, is
Sure.
basically just our virtual lives and our real lives are converging. And a lot of people these days, if you look at the little like signs, if you look around, there's a lot of signs that are pointing to more of a value in the virtual world, the virtual world turning more like the real world in terms of a real economy, people caring about that as a real identity, about things that they own in the virtual world as being similar to the real world, right? There's a whole kind of drama that Epic was talking about with skins in Fortnite, where, if you have 3 kids and you buy one of them a skin, you got to buy every kid the skin because they can't trade it and share it, right? Like, and it sounds ridiculous, but kids do care about what skin they're wearing, and they want to. If Bobby's not playing the game, Jimmy wants to use the skin. Like, why not, right? Like, if it was a physical thing, you would do that, right? And so, but there's no way you can do that in a game yet, right? And transfer ownership, it's just messy and stuff. And so there is like a real kind of use case for little things like this, right? I always kind of joke to my friends who kind of dress like slobs, but then they obsess about how their character looks and their transmogs and stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
well, you care more about your virtual self than your real self. So that's like a real thing, right? With a lot of people. And increasingly, it's not just nerds and geeks and game developers. It's the average person cares a lot about their virtual identity, whether it's like an Instagram kind of, they call it the aesthetic that they're trying to portray, or sort of, their best life or whatever it is. And that also bleeds into games and virtual worlds and all of this. And so, I think that is true. I think if you think about the next 10 years, next 20 years, um, the kind of investment that people spend real money on in a virtual world for their identity will increase, not decrease. And so, there's a compelling case to be made
I see.
for the metaverse, for the all the the different technologies that are the backbone for the metaverse, which is that's what Web3 is essentially: crypto and streaming and cross-platform things and all of that. So
I see. So you're saying that ownership over virtual goods and the integrity of them, the transferability of them is only getting more important. People are esteeming these things more as time goes on. And in the favor of NFTs, in this case, just like the blockchain protocol generally, you're saying like that seems like it might just be, like a great one size fits all database / ledger technology for companies to adopt for being able to like transfer and move these items around. Because like there's in the case of the Fortnite example, what's to prevent Fortnite, since it owns the rails of all of the player accounts and all of the skins and all the inventories, from just developing something that lets people trade stuff? For example, like, and I feel like I always end up bringing them up, but like Valve has been running these sorts of weird experiments on creating an economy on Steam for, over a decade already. And so they have Steam family sharing, where I'm able to like temporarily borrow somebody's copy of a game and play it while they're not logged on. And they've figured out a way to do that. And they did it with just tech that they rolled by themselves that probably looks
sure,
like, I don't know what it looks like, but
yeah.
it's not built upon the blockchain is what I'm saying.
probably a lot more bug free, a lot more they can fix things with it and improve it and stuff, rather than if it was just NFTs. Like
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
would be my guess,
But
and that's part of like kind of the skepticism of say Web3 and NFT. It's just like okay, yeah, you could do those things, but you could do those things already if you wanted to, right?
you could do those things. So
Um,
yeah, but I
yeah.
am thinking that like one of the benefits of if you start to put that sort of ownership on a blockchain as opposed to Valve, is you're insured against the collapse scenario in which Valve fucking disappears. Like in a world where Fortnite goes away, but somehow you still having a Fortnite skin is valuable. If it were on top of the blockchain, and the blockchain were being, propagated in this like distributed computing way, even if Fortnite kicked the bucket, you could still have the skin. Your inventory could still persist. You could still sell it. So,
I mean, that is a big concern too. Is like future proofing yourself, right? Like all these companies and organizations and stuff kind of they have FOMO of making sure they don't turn too boomer and miss out on the next big thing, right? Microsoft was probably lost years of growth because they didn't make a phone. They didn't, you know, I mean, essentially, yeah. I mean, the big one was the phone, tablet, etc. Just weren't there. They didn't see the value of it and didn't really invest in it. And so, all these companies like Facebook or Google, all these, they're so scared of that happening again that they are just willing to kind of try to like,
mm,
even though they don't quite understand it or have a vision for where it's going, to just get in early, to uh, to prep,
yeah,
like you're saying.
I mean that tack is kind of interesting because, well, what I was thinking the main topic of this might be is talking about these like paradigm shifts in the game industry and trends. Like I mentioned, achievements and games as a service the other day that like they kind of giveth and they taketh away, but they change the whole landscape. And in the games as a service world, I feel like a lot of resentment people have towards it is that you can buy a license, but then the servers might just go offline, or they might just shut it down, and then suddenly you don't even really own a game anymore necessarily. And that argument towards the blockchain and permanence, and because the ledger is run by a bunch of public computers out there and not Ubisoft or Valve, they can't shutter that blockchain and have you lose your skins. Like if you own it, quote unquote, you're just going to own it for as long as, I guess, people are running computers. I don't know the scenarios in which a blockchain goes down, but that does feel like an interesting counter argument to this kind of this like very preservationist, unfriendly, let's say, gaming landscape we live in now, right? So I could kind of see that, I guess. I'm just to recenter it. I'm trying to think of like what are player benefits that NFTs have, right? Because in that scenario you just mentioned, Fortnite putting all of its skin ownership and stuff on top of a blockchain, off the bat they win because now they're not having to deal with any of the database overhead and management of like skin ownership anymore. They've basically put it on top of a protocol that I'm guessing somebody else vetted. Like Quartz runs on this Tezos thing. Ubisoft didn't build their own blockchain protocol, right? So it's kind of like not their problem totally. And I would imagine they don't have to pay for any of the management really of like the full lifetime of these things that get generated on there. Man, this is such a sexy topic. I can just feel you two wanting to jump in.
I mean,
I
I don't know. What do
You
you
know what I mean?
mean
Like,
the cost maintain? You mean the gas price?
well, not even the gas price. I just mean like Valve pays to keep Steam's servers online, right? Steam servers, which
Uh,
amongst other things control game ownership, who has what in what wallet, whatever. If all of the items that you ever got on Steam in the marketplace, card drops, skins, couriers, whatever, if those were all on a blockchain instead, a blockchain is supposed to be a decentralized thing that's run in like a distributed way by a
yeah,
ton of
yeah.
different computers, right? So
Yeah,
Valve's not
even
paying to
Blizzard,
keep.
when you download like a WoW expansion,
Right,
you're
right, right.
torrenting it. So other players are uploading to you to
So
save
it's a
Blizzard
win for the
costs. Yeah.
company, exactly, because they're basically putting their skins on LimeWire as opposed to paying for hosting. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yep, yep.
okay,
But I
But
don't
as a player,
know. See,
yeah,
I don't have a good grasp of the cost savings with that. I think right now the cost savings aren't that great, and
right.
you also create a lot of UX loopholes for the player to go around. Right? You got to set up your MetaMask wallet. You got to get your secret key and put it into your password recovery thing. You have to go through these 4 different apps that are all different to buy anything, and then you have to wait all this time, and then the gas price fluctuates up and down. To the yesterday it was $1, today it's $10. It's just like a lot of burden that you put on the player, and right now there's just not a lot of upside. Other than say if you own the coin, own the rails, and it moons, and you make a lot of money off that. That's good, right? And that's basically the whole kind of like uh, reason why any company is making a coin or making NFTs right now is to own the currency at its infancy and make a shit ton of money when it goes up. Or I would say that's the bulk of the thesis is right now. So
Until I see, like Candace said, that kind of killer app experience that the blockchain can be,
Mhm.
I really can only assume that anybody super in favor of the blockchain right now has some financial stake in something involving the blockchain, because it really seems like it's a database protocol. It's a really cool piece of tech. But as far as its applications that we've seen so far, in terms of like at least game industry applications, we're not talking about creating like, government programs for automatically distributing supplies when you show up and scan your phone. I'm talking about what the game industry wants to do with the blockchain and NFTs. It's just an extra instrument for transferring value around, right? Like I don't see it as being anything else than that just yet, but we will probably
that's just
need.
because you don't have an imagination. You're just
Well, I
too a
don't. I mean,
boomer, and you
that's
just
why
can't
I don't have
think
an
out of the
NFT startup.
box, Luca.
I mean,
Come
I
on.
worry about that though, dude. That's why I want
No,
to
of course,
accept
and
that
that's
maybe
what
I
they
am
prey on,
just.
right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they may be right too. It's just hard to say. But one thing they always say is just like, well, free to play was demonized. Everyone said it's trash and terrible and bad for the
Well,
industry, yada yada. But then it wasn't until League of Legends came out where everybody was just like, oh, it's fine.
so
I
let's
kind of
let's
think
talk about
ultimately
that
you
though.
could put the most demonized NFT in the game, and people will play it if the game is good. So you
Right.
really have to have the door will not be open unless the game is good. It's not enough just to create a lucrative or NFT Web3 ecosystem. You have to have a good game, at least if you're
Of
making in
course.
games, right?
Yeah, of course. I don't want to play NFT Manager 2022. That sounds boring as
Yeah,
shit.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there
yeah.
are already stocks. There are real ways to do things like that. And that is a lot of what I think the NFT experience is right now, is basically just like portfolio management is what most people are using it for. But so
Mhm.
like you brought up free to play, and yeah, famously League was the first company to really make that work with a game. I remember people being really skeptical about it. Obviously that model took hold. It's everywhere in the games industry and has been for a while. I think it is one of those things that has come and is sticking around. And I think generally, I mean, it obviously has a lot going for it financially. If the model didn't make more money than the standard model, it wouldn't still be around, right? It would have just like been kicked out of the evolution of the industry. So clearly it can generate tons of cash. So companies love it. And as a player, I think you can definitely argue for a lot of pros with it, right? More people can play the games, just get access to the game than ever because there's not an entry fee. So, talking about my sort of first world perspective and like, oh, I don't want to play a game to earn cash. And Candace pointing out, well, a lot of people might. Free to play really opens the playing field for tons of people that don't, look like me, have my consumer habits, whatever. So like that shit's really cool. But I also think that a world in which free to play is like an expected model, has some consequences or downsides too. I think it affects game design, right, in like unavoidable, sometimes insidious ways. And this is the shit people make YouTube videos about, right? Like people get suspect of the monetization methods, and they start to wonder if like game design is being crippled in some ways so that it can be, enhanced with a booster or something that you buy from the shop later. Like, yes, free to play has brought a lot of good, but I think it's changed. In some cases, it's really changed what a game's design might have been if it wasn't using the free to play model. Like, I think there are probably games where that's happened, right? So I'm like wondering what what some of the consequences of something like NFTs and adding a transferable marketplace onto, let's just say, every game. Because if people start doing these Ubisoft level kind of like platform moves, then suddenly it's like anything they put on Uplay, you can get digits in, right? And you can trade on the Tezos network and other. So what happens to game design when every game now has this like extra layer on top of it?
I mean, you kind of already see this already, though, right? Because there's the WoW token. There are Fortnite
Totally, we
bucks.
talked
There
about
are
this.
Steam
Yeah.
bucks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So you kind of see this already a bit, right? This will just be like that experience, just but amplified, I would say, right?
Has that experience been? I mean, when we've talked about the WoW token in Classic, when we had our virtual economies chat, it was, well, I don't know. I mean, my takeaway from it was that we were a bit sad that in this day and age, you solved for like how much time costs, how much in-game currency costs, how much to buy a WoW token, and so every run ends up getting, and most services end up getting funneled through the currency of the WoW token, which is now like directly linked to, the real world. I don't love that. But I feel like, Candace, you brought up some examples that, I don't know, I think you had a more positive take on like what the WoW token has done to the economy. And so I don't know, like talk me off the ledge in terms of putting a marketplace that's linked to real world money in basically every game once developers realize like you got to have an NFT in there. People need their drops. What are the upsides of this brave new world? How does it not just turn into like a dystopian hellscape where like we're all grinding for drops while streaming, while doing task rabbits, while driving for Uber? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
So Candace, get Luca off the ledge, and then maybe
Yeah.
Reynolds can chime in also. I brought him up.
I unfortunately don't have a lot of comforting words for you.
Okay.
Jump.
And my point is that to some extent, developers of video games play God, right? They create a universe, they create the characters, they create the world, and sometimes they even create an algorithm in which life begins anew. In the way that if should you believe in God, if you believe that He created matter and then matter evolved, or if you believe that she created humans and then humans had more humans, etc. It's kind of like that's an algorithm for creating more life. Video games did that in Roblox and in user generated content in kind of a parallel way. And so if you look at the evolution of that and societies, you look at NFTs and you think, okay, well these are like, if you look to history, these are like the war of the religions or the war of the city states, where to bring it more like technologically advanced, or to bring it to more to the century, if you think of, remember when social networks were new and like MySpace kind of created something special, or in like blog spots and stuff like that created something special, and then everyone wanted to be the next social network, right? Google did their circles and Facebook did their thing, and Instagram said no, we're going to make our own brand that's only pictures, and Twitter says no, we're just going to give you like a micro blog, and then everyone was competing in that space.
Yeah.
And the creators of that get to also play God in the way that they decide what information that you get in a globally connected world. Well, like video games are in that same struggle right now, where so everyone wants to make the next metaverse, and what they want to make is an idealized version of the world that you want to engage with, because the real world sucks, like really bad in a lot of ways. It's beautiful in a lot of ways, but if you think of impropriety, and you think of poverty, and you think of like the well-being of humans, it's slowly trending upwards as the world becomes more technologically inclined, but then also it's plummeting downwards as the world becomes more technologically inclined. But anyways, my point is that there's this idealized version of a world that you can create, that people want to spend their time in, that people want to create communities in, and they are migrating away from their in real life social circles because they're more accessible in ways, or because they can generate extra income in ways. And so that's weird that you would make this utopia, that people want to spend their time in, and now they want to get a job in, because that wasn't something you could do before. It was strictly pleasure, right? Now you can do it as a side hustle, or now you can do it for primary income in some countries, right? And so it's kind of like art imitating life, imitating art in some way. And so these developers, what they're trying to do is make the algorithm not unlike a divine being that keeps people engaged and makes a like the perfect world or whatever. And then the irony there is that if we're all just connected into the matrix, or if we're all just connected into the metaverse or whatever, and it's just driving rampant consumerism, right? Then that makes a very dystopian real reality, but for the sake of a utopian, like idealized world. And so, anyways, my point is that the line, like you were saying, is becoming blurred. I think Chris was saying that they're mixing, or there's a lot of gray area between the living world and the online world, and it's sad. But like, so the way that I'm gonna talk you off the ledge right now is just to say that this is just games becoming more like real life, and real life sucks really, really, really bad. But maybe video games can be better.
Okay. Thank you for
Sorry.
that. No, 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 no. I think I have come around. Let me explain how listening to you just now has flipped me into like a more hopeful, or like at least straight line position on NFTs. Recently read this Neil Stephenson novel, or Fall or Dodge in Hell. Anyways, there's a digital afterlife in it where people persist. And one of the characters in this book, seeing this digital afterlife becoming created from the vantage point of the real world, is like, fuck, it's a bummer that everybody in this digital afterlife is recreating it basically along the exact same power lines as the real world existed in. It was supposed to be utopian. You could have fucking done anything you want. Why are you rebuilding it this way? And they keep referencing this line from Kant in that book that talks about how maybe humans are just such creatures of time and space that without, like, it's impossible for us to really think or process thoughts or reality in a way that is not like heavily bound to time and space as like foundational kind of principles. Like our brains just don't work without thinking about things along those axes, right? And I'm wondering if maybe we don't really, like, markets and trading and these sorts of things are also like very core and intrinsic to the way that we are. And so if bringing NFTs into an ownership and all of that into like a more thoroughly realized metaverse is just bringing the like kind of the most realistic version of the human impulse to trade and own and hoard into this new virtual space, then I guess that sounds kind of cool, because it means the metaverse is going to be better than it would be otherwise. Maybe I do want NFTs. You know what I mean? Like maybe I wouldn't be able to process a metaverse that didn't have a marketplace foundation to it. Maybe I'm so conditioned that like if things don't run on capitalism, I don't know what they fucking are. Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyways,
and
I feel,
you touched
yeah.
on
No, I was just going to say I feel a little bit better, but
you touched on something that I was kind of alluding to, but I didn't want to get too mystical and I didn't want to get too metaphysical. But the digital afterlife is something that's huge, right? Like humans love the notion of leaving a legacy. A lot of humans ascribe their entire the nature of their being to whatever legacy that they bring. All the meaning in their life is, well, what am I going to pass to my kids, or how am I going to be remembered, or how did I make the world a better place? Imagine a world where you can leave that legacy a lot more easily, because it's permanent in some way. I mean, it's not permanent when the aliens come and blow up the planet, or whenever, the red dwarf comes and envelops the entire our known universe, but like
yeah,
there's a
sure.
permanence there that lasts longer than the typical like 75 years, depending on where you
Wow.
live, of your lifespan. It's almost like if you can create such a legacy, then people want to be like you. Perhaps everyone is the next Dread Pirate Roberts, everyone is the next I don't know another analogy for that, but let's say that you physically die, but then you pass on that identity to somebody else, and that
Sure.
feels good, and that gives you meaning. And really, life is all about just trying to find meaning in a place that is um almost what combative to the nature of your own being, like you
Oh, I
live
do
like
know. Yeah.
Yeah, you live in a place that constantly wants you dead, and you have to survive every day. And as humans, we have like free will and we have emotions, and so we survive in a very different way than, let's say, like a snow leopard. It's just another way to feel connected, and humans also crave connection along with legacy. And so I think there's something kind of beautiful about it, but I sure hope it doesn't turn into what it is now, which is just um, glorified consumerism.
Yeah, hopefully it gets past that. It's good to be utopian about stuff at this stage when you can, right? I mean, that was the spirit of the internet early on, and likely of all of the Silicon Valley giants that started social networks too. So maybe it'll be a little bit different this time. Who knows? But
Imagine I think if I had another job, I think I would write Black Mirror episodes. Um, but imagine a world where you could create an algorithm that lives within, I don't know, a pocket device that you have, and it learns so much about you that it could speak just like you, and it could encapsulate the opinions that you have, and it could kind of like capture your consciousness. And then after you die, people could have conversations with you and find out stuff about your past, or ask you questions. Or imagine how useful that would be in a world where you fall in love with someone and they're dying of cancer, and you would give anything just to have, even though they're not physically there, there is like this stick of memory that contains all of the memories that they have as well. And so you get to feel like it's not just bullshit, it's not just created, it actually does come from the consciousness of that person that you love, but you get to have that forever, right? And so that's sort of what I was touching on with the afterlife. It does, Night Stalker said, it feels wrong. It feels totally wrong, but grief is a son of a bitch, and sometimes you would give anything just to have one more conversation with that person. Sorry, 2021 brought a lot of death in my family, and it has me
yeah,
thinking about death and life and meaning a lot. And so I kind of, at some point, I felt like games were pointless and life is too short. And now I feel like, to me, games are meaning, and there's a lot of beautiful meaning in games and in technology, and we just haven't figured it out yet.
dude, I love that. Ugh, that's great. I'm gonna hold on to that because
And
I
then we
loop that
promised
Yeah.
Reynold
conversation all
could
the
ask
time.
a question, and here I did, and here
Yes.
I'd like, sorry.
No,
No,
no. This is
no,
now the
this was
philosophy
beautiful.
cast. Welcome, Reynolds.
Hey, well, I'm gonna kind of jump back to a previous conversation. That one was good though, and I appreciate that. The discussion about maybe the usefulness of crypto,
Hmm.
when specifically when you were talking about NFTs, I do think that there is some potential, and I have to admit I don't know the blockchain and the ins and outs, but I understand generally there's a ledger, which is like a database, and then a protocol which enforces rules, and everyone runs this and checks against one another to make sure that nobody's, goofing with the data. Is that a fair kind of?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So in some ways, we saw this with World of Warcraft Classic, where private servers cropped up to serve a need that Blizzard no longer wanted to provide or didn't see a value in until much later. Some of these games that die off, could the server technology and a ledger that's enforced by a protocol be developed to allow the game to kind of be hosted by the players and enforced by the protocol?
Are we? I'm sorry. Is this Nostalrius?
No.
Are you is
Well,
so it
so private servers are hosted by individuals, and that comes with a lot of, you have to have
mhm,
trust in
mhm.
someone who, especially in private server scenes, this is not
Totally.
necessarily legal, and there's a lot of scammy business in there, and the leaking of passwords and data, and it's kind of a wild west. But if you could enforce the rules of the game and store data on a blockchain and allow players to connect and play with one another and authorize what one another are doing and store that in a way that's dispersed and hosted by the people who enjoy playing it, a game could maybe never die.
Oh, you're talking about like if there was like a centralized cloud that people kind of like blockchain contributed the processing power to, then in theory a game could stay alive forever. Should there be some source code somewhere that is being like evergreen hosted in the cloud, basically?
to some degree, I wonder if the architecture could be written in a way where it wouldn't necessarily need to be centrally hosted. For example, what if you just wanted to play WoW with your 5-man group or something? You could load up, and WoW is just an example here. I'm talking about any game that's multiplayer that has servers that get shut off. And there's many of these through history that you can no longer play anymore unless someone develops some technology for you to hijack the ability to connect and play with one another. And so,
Right. I see what you're saying. And I didn't mean to say that it has to be one connected server. So what you're talking about is like if you could spin up your own server of WoW, basically, because, what I meant is like the code still has to be all in one place, at least right now. And they have to do things like package a build that is playable, because that's like if you think about video games, they're just a bunch of databases that are linked together with an engine that's reading from that database and then making all the images that are processing and stuff like that. And that's essentially what making a build is. It's taking all of that data that's being written and then churning it through an engine that can kind of decipher that data and put it all together. So that's sort of what I meant by like a centralized code base. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting thought. If there weren't such strict IP laws and copyright laws, then I can see that working. I think that could also kind of be the future of video games as well. If you think you've made something really special and you encrypt the rules well enough such that people can't just go crazy with the rules, or maybe you just allow people to go crazy with the rules. Like on my server, that you leveled 100 times by killing one monster or whatever, which is also kind of what they do on private servers. I think what's interesting there is that a video game is so much more than just the art and the programming and the pixels. The soul of a video game lies within those rules. Like what makes chess fun? Chess is like if you look at a game of chess, it's a board and it has black and white squares, and then there's these pieces that have different shapes. And you move those pieces around on the board, and some people devote their whole life to that, right? Because there's rules around which way the knight moves and which way, and there's like infinite complexity there. Well, not infinite, actually. It's quite finite, as we've learned in Queen's
Right.
Gambit. But like, if you were to make a better game than chess, but the difference between just arbitrarily moving pieces on a board and playing chess is knowing the rules. And so I think what's really strange, or what's hard there, is enforcing those rules as other people have the power to either manipulate or change the game. But maybe that doesn't even matter, because maybe chess is a great playground to make a bunch of different cool games. Like that chess is a really bad example, but if you were to have like Roblox, for example, like the rules of the game are you make an avatar and then you walk around, and so many people have made so many different games out of that. I just got on a huge tangent, but I think that's really cool. I don't think many like large games would do that, because it's kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Depreciating the value of either the IP or the product or the service that they gave. Even post mortem, I think there's still value in having a sunsetted IP. Like imagine Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones, great show. A lot of people didn't like it towards the last couple of seasons, but imagine if people were just like, okay, now everyone can write their own Game of Thrones stories, and it kind of dilutes it, right? Because it's
Right.
I
the rules
think
are different, the
it's less
writing is different.
artisanal at that point. It's less someone's vision and art. It's more of just like community ran project, right? Which you could
Right.
lose a lot of like, some of what makes say Game of Thrones special, but it'll just be different, right? I don't know if it's
Yeah.
better, but it'll just be different. And maybe that different thing could be compelling and interesting and take off.
Yeah,
We
it's
just
not to
don't
say
know
that
yet.
you couldn't write 100 or 1,000 or a million good stories in that universe with somebody else
Yeah.
that isn't George R. R. Martin. And so that's kind of like the power of an IP. But again, whenever it becomes so flooded, kind of like YouTube, right? Like you can go on a YouTube rabbit hole and find a lot of really interesting videos, but for every one video that you find interesting, there's like a jillion videos you don't give a shit about. And so you kind of like lose that branding. And I think that companies spend a lot of money to make those IPs and brands. And so you won't see that very much. But I mean, Roblox certainly did it. They just kind of give you the tools to tell stories and to make compelling gameplay.
Yeah. Who
Right.
was it, Candace? I remember we had this conversation where it's like some game studio or something said, the players own our IP now. It's not ours anymore, or something like that. And so I don't know. You do see glimmers of this. I had this conversation with another person about because their pitch for their company is something like essentially it's a group, like they call these things a DAO. A DAO is like a decentralized autonomous organization. It's sort of like a glorified Discord community of a group of people who make decisions together. But kind of his idea is that different people in this group or this DAO or this Discord or whatever it is kind of all have different ownership stakes that are set on on the blockchain somehow of the project, and that's how kind of the royalties, etc., of the project are divvied up. And it's so, that's another kind of idea is like, oh well, there's no sort of company for this game. It's just all these different creators who maybe they're full-time devs somewhere else are contributing to this game, and they'll have different stakes and ownership of it. And my response was like, well, it kind of reminds me of a lot of the Dota development, because Dota, yes, Ice Frog and there's a bunch of others who kind of built heroes in that game, but really it was a community game. Also, there was like a forum full of teenagers essentially who were designing heroes, pitching heroes, suggesting balance changes. So it was really a community effort in a lot of ways. And then a lot of games are very impacted by the communities. There's going to be all these really crazy kind of interpretations of Web3, crypto, NFTs, and stuff in games in the future. Things we haven't even thought about. Because if you think about it, also was game developers who were working in the 80s and 90s thinking that there's going to be a server hosted online somewhere, and all the data, there's a database out there that stores all the rules of the game and all the data of the game and sessions and all of that? Probably not, right? There's a real world where the future of games is, there's no AWS. AWS is on the blockchain. It's all distributed, just hosted on 30,000 computers around the world and all shared and whatever. So I don't know. I think it's so early, and I think there's kind of the problem I have with NFTs and crypto and Web3 right now is just that they're trying to astroturf it, just so that they can have a stake in the beginning of it, and I think it needs to organically evolve, but we'll see.
It sounded like, Reynolds, you were asking kind of two things, where you're expressing, the desire to continue playing something that otherwise might be sunsetted. But then you were explaining that the problem with doing that in the way that it happens now with private servers is that there's like an integrity problem where if someone owns the keys to everything, they can change the rules, dupe things, give shit to yourself. So even in situations where somehow a private server happens, you can't trust it. And and so you're wondering if the blockchain maybe could help solve any of those sorts of things. And the integrity question, it completely could in terms of managing inventories and stuff like that. I mean, one of the big selling points of it, and we're seeing that, sometimes this falls through, but is that this ledger is kind of public and traceable and incorruptible,
Right.
short of like what do they call it, like a 51% attack, where the way that new entries in the ledger get
Nodes or
minted is
whatever.
basically by consensus, right? So if somebody owned 51% of the computers in the network, they could create a consensus that is in their favor and wrong, and that could become the new reality. But
Right.
so I think it could work in those sorts of scenarios. In terms of keeping the code for this online, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to think of a game in which as much of the data that doesn't need to rapidly change and transact between people as possible is kicked out to a decentralized model for the sake of that. I've been sitting here like, I can't think of a single reason why I want NFTs in video games or why I want the blockchain really in video games. And the fucking answer to my question has been sitting under my nose the entire time. And I'm sure you can guess what it is, which is that if New World had run its economy on top of a blockchain or a ledger that couldn't be messed with, think of all the headaches they could save themselves with. Like, here is a game in recent memory that has had a centralized collection of servers handling people's incomes and like dodgy client server relationships, and like dupes have just been crushing people's expectations of the game. I mean, it makes me not want to log in if I think that like there's all this illicit currency floating out there because then mine's not worth anything, or I'm living in this hyperinflated world. And I'm
Right.
like, what if they had just strapped all of our money to the blockchain instead, and I would just never have to worry about something like that? And it actually made me kind of excited for more companies to maybe, implement tech like that for like guaranteeing that kind of integrity. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
hmm
And I want to clarify one thing, because I think maybe Candace, with the Roblox conversation, the intellectual property, went into a tangent that maybe I wasn't really even thinking about. But I was thinking more of, in terms of game preservation, and like Luca talked about, the integrity of kind of maintaining something that doesn't change. So like end of life games that aren't being developed, that kind of are at their final point, where the rules are developed and could be enforced as they exist, and just don't have the means or the financial, incentive to continue to be hosted. But then if you released some, blockchain protocol ledger thing to handle the server side thing, that everybody's kind of, I'm going to date myself here, but like, Napster or Torrent contributing to, everyone's kind of running, authority checks and confirming that all the data coming through matches, and so you don't get one of these 51% attacks or whatever, so that everyone who's playing can still enjoy the experience based on the rules that existed at that time, and the data is all
Totally.
free from interruption.
One thing to swat at that, and I don't mean to I'm not saying it's not possible. You would have to develop the game in a way that makes it bulletproof in that manner. There's a lot of man behind the curtain when it comes to a server getting up and running and the data matching that, and then the client matching all of that as well. That's why live games are so expensive, is because and the game isn't perfect, right? So there's sometimes the game can corrupt the data, or sometimes the game can crash the servers, or stuff like that. So like what you'd need is also a team of people, kind of like WoW add-ons. Like, you know how WoW add-ons eventually deprecate themselves because
Yeah.
the code changes or whatever. Like, you'd still need a group of people that are dedicated to fixing issues that cause these common problems, that cause these common crashes or whatever. But again, that could be sourced. You would just have to have an open source kind of code base that people could contribute to, but then also they'd have to have the honor code, or they'd have to have the inability to change the rules of the game, which right now those two things are tied, are not untied from each other. So like it's idyllic, because then any game could last forever. But then to summarize what I just said, is that live games require a lot of maintenance, and there's a lot of bugs, and there's a lot of oversight that needs to be had, other than just keeping a server up and running. And with that, I think that was our last question. So it's 7:30. How are you guys feeling?
Yeah.
I think it's time to wrap, or I got to edit
Maybe
this
Luca
thing.
could
So
wrap us up.
sure. Thanks everybody for joining us again. Thanks Candace for hopping on midway through. I'm sorry about LA and traffic, but you love it. Like you
Yeah,
hate
it's
everything.
Yeah.
you in front of me and be sure when you edit this to make me not sound like a crazy person, because I I realized that I went off on some pretty crazy tangents today. Thanks for holding in with me, everybody.
Honestly, I
Loved
love the
it.
freeform escalations that come out of this. This felt, and I was saying to you all, like a very Clubhouse episode, because we were just talking about NFTs the whole time. But I think I'm going to call it the blockchain episode instead, because like NFTs
Yeah.
are a bit of a turn off. If I saw
Except if
NFTs on my thumbnail,
Yeah. Except if
I'd
we're on
probably
Clubhouse,
yikes
there'd be 40 other people in here all shilling
100%.
NFTs and crypto. So
Oh, Clubhouse. Yeah, so thankful
Yeah.
for Clubhouse. Okay, we will see you all pretty soon. We're going to try to squeeze in, I think, another episode before the year ends, something holiday-ish. But until then, Chris leaves you
Later,
with
gamers.
his favorite. Okay, see you later.